And we're with Xiangyu. He's from Taiwan. We're going to be talking about Taiwan. For people who don't know, he's a really good political analyst, especially about geopolitics in Asia. He's also a bit of an artist, a musical artist, and I posted his latest music video in the comment section early on, and it will be in the video description as well, along with all the other places you can find and follow his work. So without further ado, Xiangyu, can you please introduce yourself? And maybe we'll just jump right into it. Introduce yourself and then let's talk about what's going on with Taiwan.
Okay, so my name is Xiang Yu, and right now I am back in Taiwan completing my substitute service. So I am basically a store brand civil servant, which means I have a lot of time to read and like get into these sorts of topics and also battle with malformoids on Twitter. So now that I have my account back, yeah. So yeah,
Okay,
so
and
I think the topics that I really specialize in are cross-strait relations and as well as putting them into context of the things happening on the ground over here in Taiwan. Yeah.
so what's it like there? I want to hear from you. What is it like in Taiwan right now? We see all these news stories about the U.S. pumping weapons onto the island province. We hear about all of these tensions growing. What is it like there on the ground? And then I want Angela had been to Taiwan many years ago. It would be interesting to compare and contrast where it is now and where it was years ago, and to see what the kind of trend is. So, what's it like there now?
I mean, day-to-day life is still the same. You know, everyone's just trying to get on with their lives, work hard, try to build better lives for themselves and their children, their futures. But one thing I'm noticing now, much more so than say even like 2 or 3 years ago, is there is a very great disconnect between what the officials are saying and what they're telling people abroad and what they want, for example, people in the West to think the way that people on the ground over here are thinking. And I want to say right now that I know that a lot of my views aren't representative of the majority here, but I'm also coming from a perspective of explaining how what makes people over here think the way they do, and I'm aware of my own positions and my biases, and yeah, that's just the aside. But people here are very sick of the incumbent party. Now, this isn't to say that they're anxious to reunify tomorrow. They're just at the point where they're like, the DPP is saying the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party, they're saying a bunch of things and pumping us up on international media, but they're not really they're neglecting our livelihoods. And just an example of something that happened at work the other day at the fire training center. This one woman, I hope she's not listening, because if I guess her age wrong, she'll get mad at me. But I think she's in her late 30s or early 40s. If she's listening, I'm gonna say she's 25. But she was just something was playing on the TV. I forgot what it was, and she was like, "I don't care who you guys vote for, just vote all of those Greens out, the Greens the DPP." And she was like, "I admit I used to vote for them, but not anymore. Just get them out." There's a lot of
Yeah.
distrust because there's a lot of cope too, because people know how the economy is doing. You don't need to be some sort of economist to realize that the prices of everything's rising and your pays stagnant. You don't need to look at these fancy graphs or listen to experts, but the experts are trying to justify, oh yeah, but our GDP per capita is growing and blah blah blah. Perhaps maybe nominal GDP per capita might be growing. I haven't looked into it, but I mean, at the same time, I know people are having an increasingly difficult time just getting by. And it's getting close to election season, so you're starting to see like a lot of ads. Like, I remember just getting off the plane back in November at the airport, and there's these ads saying things like don't fall for what is it, fake information coming from the outside. And by the outside, you're probably implying mainland China, they're pretty much pulling like like you know how there was Russiagate in both 2016 and 2020 in the US elections. Yeah, they're basically doing that over here, saying that like basically if you say anything that's against the DPP, there's gonna be like internet trolls that are just gonna be like, oh, that's just mainland. Well, they don't say mainland because they see it as two separate countries. They'll be like, that's just Chinese propaganda. You're a Chinese bot. Yeah. And
So
I have
so
to be kind of careful with what I'm doing. I think in English it's fine, but I just posted some joke on Weibo, and like some like fucking like piece of shit like took screenshots and like reported it to the relevant authorities, knowing that I'm doing my service. So yeah, I ended up like getting called to go speak with our deputy over there, and had to just like yeah go deal with that. I mean, it's just a mess right now. To the person
well,
who
isn't that
snitched on
ironic
me though.
though? Okay. Isn't that ironic though that these people pretend that they represent some progressive democratic ideology, and yet they're so quick to shout down anyone who disagrees with them, and not just that, but to report them, to try to ruin their life just for expressing an idea different than their own, which is something that they always accuse everyone else of. That they always pretend to be a victim. Now you're talking about the livelihood. How much in reality is this owed to the current DPP administration alienating itself from the rest of China and complicating trade because they're trying to artificially isolate themselves from the rest of China? And how many people on the island actually understand that that is the root cause?
I'd say a huge part of it has to do with that, but the other is I guess it goes hand in hand because by isolating itself from the rest of China, and but even then China mainland China is still like our number one destination for exports and also imports. But by trying to move away from that and get closer with the rest of the world, like the Western economy, which is like a lot more speculative and less real, whereas like the mainland Chinese economy is more based in manufacturing and a real economy. That has to do with it, international trends. I think a lot of people on an intuitive level, and this is just I don't have the I don't like I haven't done like a study on it, but I think a lot of people recognize that that has at least some parts has something to do with it. And
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment
Sure.
from can I make a comment about what you
Sure.
said
Sure.
earlier about
Sure.
liberals doing what they're doing. I don't want to like go to the point in saying that it's becoming fascist here, but I mean, if you think about fascism, it's basically liberalism in a state of psychosis. It's you know how in after the Russian Revolution when the Civil War began and 15 countries invaded the Soviet Republic, how Lenin like had to move the country into a state of war communism, which greatly curtailed people's individual freedoms and whatever for the sake of their survival of the state. I think like liberalism and psychosis is like the it's like the capitalist twin of that. You're using all these desperate measures to defend this current system from change from yeah from below.
Xiang, you have a question. It's a bit of a stretch what I'm going to say, but don't you think sometimes the way I see in Western societies how they want to deconstruct values, family, nations, individual, it looks very similar to the deconstruction China led during the Cultural Revolution. You remember when they wanted to deconstruct society because supposedly, China was stuck with this feudal system with those old ideas, and the ideas was to reshape, completely deconstruct that, and to start on new foundation. What is your view on that?
I think there are some parallels when it comes to like the worst successes of the Cultural Revolution. But at the same time, one of the stereotypes that we have of the Cultural Revolution is there are a bunch of local local like overlords that are just like you know pretty much acting like the old feudal lords, and they're oppressing the people. And the stereotype is the people could rise up, and with the Red Book they were on like equal equal position with those people, with those local bureaucrats, and they were trying to take the country, take their villages, take their towns back for themselves. And the Cultural Revolution, I mean, there were great excesses. I mean, there were also some good things about it, but it was mostly something that yes, Mao did give them the green light, but then what happened was it came from below. Whereas what you're talking about right now comes from like civil society institutions. It's with a bunch of NGOs um like that are funded by like global finance, like the Rockefellers, for example. You have the Ford Foundation, you have the Open Society Foundations,
NED.
you have all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And what
although
they
there
do
are
is
some
like an art.
similarities.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say they do like an artificial from the ground up, but actually it's from the top down, and
Yeah.
it's just an art. They make it look like it's grassroots when in reality, if you cut the money, it would be over tomorrow, pretty much.
And I think this is why there's so much support from Western liberal and left-wing commentators for Taiwan separatism, or not even real separatism, but like using Taiwan to as a wedge against the Chinese mainland, is simply due to the fact that these two tendencies, like Taiwan separatism and the radical liberal left in the West today, they're cut from the same cloth. And the same shady organizations that push left liberalism are the same ones that pull the strings of color revolutions abroad. So yeah, it's, I mean, you see the congressional the Congressional Progressive Caucus meeting with the DPP, and it's kind of encouraging the DPP to win over the well-intentioned but in Jiang Zemin's words, sometimes naive like students and activists into supporting independence and substance, but like wrapped in like words of decolonization, self-determination, sovereignty in words. And yeah, so don't just follow the discourse, you got to follow the money behind the discourse, because the discourse always follows the money.
And what, I mean, in your opinion, and maybe people around you, things that you've heard, all of this talk about independence or separatism, do people really understand the ramifications of that? You already mentioned that most of the island province of Taiwan's exports go to the rest of China. Most of their imports come from the rest of China. Does anyone ever stop and think, well, if we do that and that trade ends, how are we replacing that? And you already talked about an economy in decline. What do they understand the ramifications? I mean, surely you do, but the people around you that are kind of going along with this, maybe, do they understand that?
I think this is why most people want to maintain the status quo. I think most people on the ground do not want conflict with the mainland. Now, they might be led to believe that the mainland is being aggressive towards us. And I mean, if you remove things from context, it can certainly appear that way. But yeah, I mean, most people just want to maintain the status quo. Like, actual separatism would mean redefining the Constitution and redrawing the constitutional map. And the DPP is very aware of this, which is why depending on the situation, they might up the rhetoric and say things like, "Oh, the Republic of China is a foreign colonial government. It's they call it 外来政权, which is like a foreign occupying force," and all that. But then, hey, as soon as they get into power and they want to de-escalate, they'll be like, "We don't need to declare independence because we are already an independent country called the Republic of China." But then they're very vague about what Republic of China means, because if you look at the Constitution, the so-called Republic of China and Taiwan are not one and the same. Taiwan is but a province of the Republic of China. If you recognize the Republic of China, it still operates under a one China framework. I like to call it alt one China. You know how there's like the alt right in America. This is an alt one China.
Well, Xiangyu, I have a question here. In terms of practicability, it is close to impossible for Taiwan to declare independence, because the whole process would mean to change the constitution. In order to change the constitution, you need to have 3/4 of what they call a legislative yuan. So you could have a referendum, and then you have to have passed the 50% plus.
Yeah.
So practically, it's close to impossible. So what what worries me is that could there be a possible, some manipulation, maybe a soft coup? I was thinking maybe a soft coup, something similar to what Zelensky did. If you really look at what happened in Ukraine, not only Zelensky took the power, but then at some point with the martial law, they could find loopholes in the law just to take over the power and hijack completely the democracy, keeping in mind that Taiwan is a young democracy. Not long ago, you had martial law. In the 80s, Taiwan was still under martial law. So just imagine the tension growing up between both sides of the strait, and then at some point, Taiwan feeling legitimate legitimacy in calling martial law and herself having increasing power and not having any more elections. You see, I mean, Zelensky has called off the next elections. So that's my little worry, is that they do something before the next elections, or they manipulate the elections, like they did in, I don't know if you remember, in 2006 there was this fake assassination attempt on Chen Shui-bian, was from the DPP,
2004.
and that 2004, and actually he just won, but because it was a vote of compassion, and he had nothing, just a few scratches. And guess what? Who came to check on this commission on the scratches? They were American doctors, Yeah. So what do you think about possible soft coup there?
I think a soft coup's already happened. Notice how 2014 was the year of the Sunflower Movement here, which was also the same year as the Umbrella Movement in Hong Kong, as well as the Maidan color revolution in Ukraine. Do you think it's that much of a coincidence that all three of them happened in the same year? Especially if you read do I have that book with me? I do not think I do. I think I left it at the Fire Academy. But Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, what is it? The Grand Chessboard. His biggest fear is China and Russia united, not necessarily ideologically, but over common interests. And he does not want to see a strong Eurasia, which is why he's emphasizing the importance of having having outposts on at least the periphery of this region, of not just in Asia but also in Europe. And so I think that's pretty much why you saw all those events happening around the same time during Obama's second term. And I mean, the pivot to Asia also happened under Obama's second term. And I think Trump's presidency may have delayed it a little bit because the two parties did not. They have some similar interests, but their approach to foreign policy is not exactly the same. And there was also some in some areas where Trump did not see eye to eye with the neocons in his cabinet. So that basically made the U.S. a bit less competent than usual at carrying out its the enforcement of hegemony, in my opinion. Now, I mean, terrible things still did happen, like the assassination of General Soleimani in Iran. So I think with the election of Biden, it was the stuff that's happening now is basically the stuff that Obama and the DNC had planned between the years of 2016 and 2020. So yeah, with the Sunflower Movement in 2014, you saw the rise of the New Power Party. And the New Power Party is interesting because it's nominally a separate party, but it operates, the role that it played at that time is similar to the role that the Squad played in the US. Now the Squad, like AOC, Ilhan Omar, and the other names of the other people escape me right now, but they're all the same. They're within the Democratic Party, whereas over here the New Power Party is separate. And it was also I feel like it marked the completion of the reconstitution of the Democratic Progressive Party, because the Democratic Progressive Party, if you were following Taiwan politics in, like, say, the 2000s up until like 2008, it was kind of seen as the party, for lack of a better term, the party for Taiwanese rednecks. But now it's kind of like the metropolitan party, where people are like, trying to be like progressive, therefore LGBT rights, therefore a lot of things that are like nominally or like what people associate with left-wing politics nowadays, you know. And
That's actually interesting. Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think the soft coup did happen. I mean, this is this sort of the woke washing of US imperialism is something that's happening internationally, and I feel like it happened in the US. I think it got ramped up much more during around 2016, but I feel like they were testing the waters with you know, Ukraine, Taiwan, Hong Kong, because what you're seeing like going on in the US with like the pro-establishment left is basically what's been happening in places like this. So it's like, in a way, like when I speak of US politics and talk about those trends I'm seeing, it's like I'm coming from the future. And then at the same time, people when people talk, like I see like the decline of the US, like the increase in like homelessness, mental health issues, drug abuse, and all that stuff, just walking around the streets of New York. It's, I mean, things aren't that bad over here in Taiwan, but it's like if we keep on pursuing the path that we're pursuing economically and not divorcing ourselves from you know, what is it in Chinese? It's 一边倒. It's like you know, like just going all in and being the kowtowing to Washington. I was gonna say it in a more crass way, but I don't know if that's appropriate for this channel. Yeah, I feel like that would be the future for Taiwan. So it's like in a way, I'm like also coming from the future, like when I'm coming back to Taiwan from the US, like seeing some of the things going on over there, you know.
That's a really good point, and that's my biggest fear of U.S. interference all across Asia. You see what Asia is and where it's going, and you see how the influence of the United States is like a brick tied around its neck and thrown into the water, and it's very depressing. This is something that we have to try to raise awareness of. You were talking about the Republic of China, and you were explaining how even according to the Constitution of the Republic of China, based in Taipei on the island of Taiwan, it's just a province of all of China. Angelo has talked about his time in Taiwan many years ago and how people identified as being Chinese. They're Chinese people. But today, how would you assess how people identify? And can you identify efforts, concerted efforts by the US to get into the education system, the media, and try to convince people living in Taiwan that, no, you're not Chinese, you're something separate and different, like they were doing to Ukraine, trying to convince them that somehow they're not Slavic?
Yeah. Well, see, like I remember the 90s, like in Taiwan. And my mom's from Tainan in southern Taiwan, which is a stronghold for the DPP, which is usually a little bit more sympathetic towards separatism. But even in the 90s over there, people over there called themselves Chinese. So it was just really odd that because like growing up, I mean, my parents were educated in like the 60s, 70s, and you know, they were told they're Chinese. Well, my dad's just not straight up not Taiwanese. He's a citizen of the Taiwan area, but he's part of the Chinese diaspora in Korea, but he received like a Chinese education. Long story, we won't get into that today, but yeah, I mean, my parents were educated. Like my mom brought up being told that she's Chinese. So I mean, growing up, she told me that I'm Chinese. My dad told me I'm Chinese. And it's just something that I just identified with and didn't really question. And then like the 2000s came along, and I noticed, wait, more and more people in Taiwan are saying, no, we are not Chinese. And I'm just saying, wait, so how did this all change? And what happened was, so Chen Shui-bian was elected in 2000, and he became the first leader of Taiwan from the Democratic Progressive Party, which I mean, the DPP arose from a liberal opposition movement to the KMT in the 1980s. And I mean, after they had accomplished their goals, it's like, how do they maintain support? How do they differentiate themselves from the KMT? And I mean, the KMT, as you all know, committed a lot of horrible atrocities in Taiwan, like from 1945 until like the end of martial law, and people have bad memories of it. And it just so happens that much of the KMT ruling elites came from the mainland, right? So it's kind of easy to just be like, oh, well, I mean, the majority of people in Taiwan, I mean, the majority of the people in Taiwan are still Han, but they're not mainlanders, like what we call white Shengren, like people extra provincials. They refer to people who came to Taiwan like around 1945 until the 1950s, whereas everyone else whose families came here much earlier, they're called Ben Shengren, or like people from this province, so like locals. And the locals make up the majority of the population, so the DPP could just be like, oh yeah, see, like white Shengren, like they did all these terrible things, and now we need a Taiwan for the Taiwanese, which is a sentiment I agree with. We need a Taiwan for the Taiwanese, like the local people over here, not for London and Wall Street. But
good point. That's a good point.
Anyways,
Really good
so Chen
point.
Shui-bian comes along and he runs on that platform. But then at the same time, because separatism wasn't like too popular in 2000, like when he got inaugurated, he had to still make a bunch of promises about how he won't like change the name of the so-called republic, or make moves towards separatism and whatever. But he also promised that he wouldn't get rid of the the Reunification Council, or whatever it's called, but he still got rid of it towards the end. But yeah, he around that time he started this sort of desensitization, where I guess in education people there's less emphasis on like, you know, Chinese history, Chinese literature, Chinese, like all of that stuff. I mean, there still is. I mean, you still had to study Chinese literature because that's the language we speak, but it's a lot less emphasis. And whereas like my mom's like generation, like they grew up like learning a bunch of like heavy emphasis on Chinese history, and like tying that with like modern day China and like why they're Chinese. I mean, the version they were told was China is forever, the CPC is temporary, we're forever, which you know, like relatively tame compared to what's going on today. So yeah, changes in education. So a new generation was brought up, just being told that they're not Chinese, or just kind of being led to believe that they're something different from Chinese, because there was in the past, it's not like people were denied Taiwanese identity, as some separatists want to say. I mean, there were some things that the KMT did that made people certainly feel that way, like the Mandarinization of Taiwan. They did it a bit heavy-handedly. Like I mean, local dialects still existed, but then it's like at schools, if you got caught speaking a local dialect, you got fined. It's yeah, the KMT was not, back then, it wasn't exactly pro-separatist. It threw separatists in jail, but at the same time, I must say, it laid a lot of it unintentionally paved the path for these separatist sentiments to come. And of course, behind all of this, there's also a US that's very willing to take advantage of all these contradictions to ensure that Taiwan is separated from the mainland. And I must say, back then, even though people were taught to be anti-communist, they were very proud Chinese people. And around the 80s and 90s was when contacts with the mainland were increasing. And as the mainland gets stronger, I mean, if you're still in that patriotic mindset, you'd think, hey, you know what? Even if everything we were told about the CPC were true, even if Mao was a monster who killed like guerrillions of people, things are going well right now. We want China to be better. We want to fight for a better China together. You know, this is our country of the people on two sides of the strait. And these sorts of sentiments would not, I guess, would not be good for the U.S. maintaining its hegemony in the region. So I think that's why there also were efforts by like NGOs to sort of spread this sort of identity stuff, to tell people, hey, try to convince people that they're just not Chinese.
I have a bit of
that's really great insight. Yeah, go ahead, Angelo.
I have a bit of a challenge here. It's going to be a bit of a stretch. I'm going to make a parallel between Ukraine and Taiwan, and I think there's plenty of parallels. But you see, there's this relationship between Ukraine and Poland, and basically Poland, Ukraine used to belong. They were together. I mean, basically Poland, part of Poland was in history was part of Ukraine was belonged to Poland. And so Poland is pretending that they are the friends of Ukraine, while there were lots of massacres of Polish people by Ukrainians. There's a dirty history there, and there's a possible maybe in the near future, like Polish troops that could go into Ukraine and claim part of Ukraine. Okay, now we know the history between Taiwan and Japan. And Japan has clearly said that they have reinterpreted their constitution, and they're saying that basically they could help Taiwan. Taiwan is an ally, and they could come at the help of Taiwan. I have the impression that maybe Japan, they have an eye maybe on Taiwan, and
They always
actually
have.
they might get closer to Taiwan. But you see, if they do that, why for them they have skin in the game, they have something to gain, the same as they have something to gain to get back the Kuril Islands that was taken from them in World War II. And sometimes I see the behavior of Tsai Ing-wen. She says lots of things that are actually makes people very skeptical. She start bowing, she start having Japanese attitude. Chinese don't bow. That is, Japanese do that. And you see in her meetings with foreign, Western visitors, she bows. There's lots of things that she says. Oh, we know. She takes, she cherishes the Japanese culture and the language and so on, and the history too. There's a revision in history on how much good things Japanese have brought to the island. So my impression, yeah, I know what you mean. But people reinvent the history. They rewrite the history, and you see that I mean, those kids growing up right now in Taiwan, they they learn under the new books that they were imposed by Chen Shui-bian when he was elected. So you see, they have redone this whole identity, and those kids, they think that Taiwan's history started in 1949. The same as they did in Ukraine. What you do is that if you want the kids to be with you, first thing you do is that you rewrite the books. Then you have a whole generation being brainwashed. So what do you think about this dirty game that actually Japan is doing? And if it was, does it have maybe a claim on the island? Because ultimately, you know what? They keep on claiming we want sovereignty and so on, but it's not. I mean, you are you are selling your soul to people that do not care about you, and ultimately you might actually lose it completely to the Japanese, and we all know what the Japanese did to the Chinese.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Tsai Ing-wen is I want to clear something out, because there's some people who come up with things saying, oh yeah, actually these people are that way because after the end of Japanese rule, they secretly had like a bunch of Japanese people stay here, and a lot of people here have Japanese heritage. And I don't think we should go into a race science approach. And what's the truth is actually a lot more sinister, because if you were like part Japanese and you have loyalties to Japan, I can kind of understand it. Now, people like Tsai Ing-wen, her family, her father, there was this thing. So 2% of the population towards the end of Japanese occupation in Taiwan, there was this sort of ritual. If you meet certain requirements, you speak Japanese at home, you practice Shintoism, you become short. I don't know, I'm just kidding. But basically you have to totally assimilate into Japanese culture. And once you do that, then you can go through this ritual where you renounce your Chinese ancestors and adopt a new set of fake Japanese ancestors, and you become what in Japanese is called komin, or in Chinese the same characters are read huangmin. So like I guess subjects of the empire of the emperor, imperial subjects. And what that did was legally it put them on equal footing with Japanese citizens from Japan, though in reality they were still kind of second class to the rest of the Japanese, but we're still like a step above local Taiwanese. Now, only 2% of the population in Taiwan did this, and most of them came from the landed aristocracy. So you can kind of see the class interest. It's because when the Japanese ruled Taiwan, they did so partially by kind of co-opting the traditional the feudal landed aristocracy over here. Now, why those people end up being more pro-Japan and anti-China is because when the KMT came, and keep in mind, these people have been in Taiwan for hundreds of years, they have less of an emotional connection with the mainland. Chiang Kai-shek comes and he's like, you know what? I got screwed over on the mainland because I was beholden to the feudal landlords, and that screwed me over. But over here, I got my military, and I don't have that sort of relationship with you landlords. And I heard I had some difficult lessons on the mainland, so we're gonna do some land reform. And also at the same time, with martial law, elections were suspended beyond the local level. So at the provincial level or at the there were also Taipei and Kaohsiung became provincial level cities. So then their mayors weren't elected directly by the people, but appointed. And then there was a so-called National Assembly, which was elected in I think 1947 or 1948. And elections never occurred again on Taiwan because the excuse was, well, our country is in a state of unity. Most of the territory is in the hands of the communists, so elections aren't fair. So until we reunify, there's not going to be elections. So, but what that meant was all these old people, and by the 80s, they were all in wheelchairs, and the ones that still hadn't died yet, who were out of touch with the locals over here. I mean, even on the mainland, they were out of touch with the people because they were the elites, and over here, it's yeah. So they had those people, and you have a bunch of outsiders coming in, and whereas the Japanese co-opted the landed aristocracy and gave them some level of power, the KMT the KMT still did to some extent give them some power, but not in the highest echelons. In the highest echelons, it was mostly a bunch of old farts from the mainland. So that's why they felt so screwed, and that's why a lot of their children ended up in the DP, in the liberal opposition movement, because that was their end to get back into power. That's why if you look at the DPP, not the DPP, if you look at the liberal opposition, a lot of it wasn't really even about Taiwan's separatism per se. It was about how it was against the KMT and their claims of being the sole legitimate government of China, especially after Taipei was kicked out of the UN as China's representative, and basically saying this is what's keeping us isolated, and we want a Washington style democracy, and we want to redraw our borders, blah 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 blah. It was also their way of changing things up so they could get back into power, which I feel, although they didn't succeed in their goals of forming a new republic and doing all of that stuff, their other stated goals, I mean, they basically got. That's also why separatists today, they're doing that to really appeal to naive voters and voters who just do want separatism, or usually just young and naive activists nowadays. But I mean but then once they get into power, they're always just oh, we're already an independent country called the Republic of China, even though the party platform of the DPP calls for the abolition of the Republic of China, which is really funny. Yeah, so now you can kind of understand why.
And I think I was actually, before Angelo asked his question, I was also going to talk about comparing Taiwan with Ukraine. Do people there around you in Taiwan, do they see what's going on in Ukraine, how the US is using them as a battering ram against Russia and obliterating their country, evaporating their future? Do people see that and think, well, we're obviously next if we go along with this? Do people understand that there?
I'm really glad you asked that, because okay, so there are if you go to Ximending, which usually has a bunch of Falun Gong protesters and whatever, a bunch of glowies, you'll see every now and then you'll see these events with a bunch of Ukrainian flags, and they try to make it look grassroots, but it's not. And I have a story about that. It wasn't me, it was a friend who attended this event. But I mean, where I'm doing my service, Nantou, Central Taiwan, in a rural area, I went to buy roast chicken this one day, and I guess this the guy working, the owner. Hold on a second. The phone keeps on ringing. I think it's my mom calling my grandma.
That's okay. That's okay.
Can you just give me 2 minutes?
Sure. Yes, sure. Family first. Maybe yes. I'll mute his microphone to give him some privacy. Okay.
Yes. No, but it's a very interesting story here. I think it's good we have Xiang Yu just talking yes. directly to us. I think it would be interesting if he can come back and talk about maybe the one country two system. Also, how I think how they played with Hong Kong protests. I mean, basically, Tsai Ing-wen, she was elected because of the protests in 2019 in Hong Kong, and they leveraged this whole fear of China. So what happens is that before the election, she had only 35% of support, and she went from 35% to 60%. Oh, there you go.
Where were we?
Xiang,
I was
I'm going
yeah.
to repeat that. I want to go back to what happened in 2019 and the riots in Hong Kong, but also how the Taiwan supported the riot, but at the same time, I'm talking about the DPP, especially the CPP, and actually they went from a support of 35% to 60%. So basically, people hated Taiwan. They hated her so much. And actually, if you look at the DPP, it has been a history of failure all along. So in 2004, he was elected, Shang Shuibian from the DPP was elected because it was a vote of compassion, because supposedly, these assassination attempts. Then there was a corruption case against him, if you remember. He was caught. I think he's still in prison, or I think he's at home. He's a bit sick. Then there are lots of cases against the DPP. Supposedly she has 1.5 PhDs, and there's a huge. I mean, we all know it's completely fake. That's from the London School of Economics, and they cannot tell who was actually in charge of a PhD, and they couldn't find the thesis. If when you do a PhD, you have a thesis, and the thesis appeared only 2 years ago. So 20 years later, a thesis appears and it's co-written. So you have lots of cases like this. So, there's lots of corruption, and people are so upset. They know they've been cheated all along. But then every time you have something. So you had 2014, the Sunflower Revolution, this movement. And then 2019. And I'd like you to, if you can actually talk about what happened in 2019 and how the DPP used that event, and also this the whole implication of the one country two system you have in Hong Kong, which, to my opinion, was used in order to show Taiwan, you see, it is working. We can work under the framework of one country two system in Hong Kong, and we are going to do the same for you in Taiwan. So basically, nothing changes.
Yeah, but then the U.S. Created those riots specifically to try to convince everybody that system will not work and that Taiwan will be next. So I would like to hear your take on that, and then after that, please get into
Ukraine 2.0. So Tom 2, 1012. I saw your comment. Don't worry, we're gonna get back to that. You raised very good points, and it was a clear campaign of fear mongering, and because people in Taiwan do tend to be pretty open-minded about things. You have a whole generation like boomers. They grew up really wanting some sort of reunification. So then, of course, hey, Hong Kong was returned, and I guess it was a happy event. People were still pretty patriotic back then towards China, and they're like, hey, one of the remnants of the century of humiliations, like kind of back where it belongs. So, and but at the same time, they were also raised to be distrustful of the CPC. So it's like, okay, well, things are changing. We can observe from a bit of a distance and see and let the CPC prove itself in Hong Kong. So of course you're gonna have people trying to sabotage Hong Kong. Now, the whole like nothing changes for 50 years. I think there's conditions to that, because if you have like outside forces trying to disrupt the equilibrium, you're gonna have to have some changes, and that's why the national security law and stuff had to be passed. So yeah, it was definitely a campaign of fear mongering, and unfortunately, the media over here in Taiwan is basically just translated Western media. You look at the investment portfolio, you look at the ownership of most of the mainstream media. It's they're owned by a bunch of like Western like fund managers, including like BlackRock, or these like small like media groups that like basically like hedge funds and stuff like that. The one channel that did not have that was owned mostly by a local Taiwanese businessman, CTI. I don't have to agree with that channel, but I think as people of a democratic society, you should be questioning, are the reasons that they gave for getting rid of their broadcasting license real, or is it because there's other factors? Because he is a guy who has business ties on the mainland, wants a stable position, a stable situation, and of course, so of course he's going to be a little bit less all the way pro-US, like that. So that channel is going to be a little bit less pro-US and be a little bit more I guess pro-mainland, which it was like pretty pro-mainland in comparison to the other channels. And there is a contradiction between industrial capital and finance capital. Industrial capital is like the real economy, and industrial capitalists want growth and competition, whereas finance capitalists want to maintain their monopolies and their positions in hegemony, and they want to push the opposite agenda. They want to prevent the rise of growth, this is why when you see like the U.S. invading Iraq, the U.S. didn't go and take the oil. It just wanted to control the markets. It didn't want competitors rising. I mean, if the U.S. wanted to if the financial elites wanted growth, like every time, like you would, like 1990s Russia would have seen a bunch of economic growth, but we didn't see that. We saw a bunch of hyper austerity, and so yeah, that's part of the contradictions that's in the picture. So the media is what I'm trying to say is it's very heavily influenced by the financial elites of the world, Wall Street. That's the same case with US media. So yeah, media over here is basically Western media translated into Chinese. So the people's understanding of situations like Hong Kong is going to be very one-sided. And I mean, they'll just show like news clips of that one guy getting shot by the cop, which it was an unfortunate event. I mean, he was a kid. He's probably just like naive and joined the riots and got a little bit too carried away. But in no country do you like go up and like try to beat a cop that many times. It's if you compare, so then like people in Taiwan would see that and be like, oh my god, like imagine getting shot like for a peaceful protest, which is not peaceful at all. But then at the same time, I'm just like, okay, this is like very, very tame compared to like what people in the US get shot for.
Yes. Can you please get into Ukraine 2.0 before your
so the people's attitudes about it, right? Okay, so
yes.
Yeah, you got some people who are influenced like top down. They're like the academics and like the college activists and all of that. And I have a friend who went to a Ukraine event, one of those events where they try to come in and like raise awareness about why Ukraine matters and like how people from Ukraine and people in Taiwan are from freedom loving lands, and how like it's glowy NGO stuff. And but then like those types of events tend to just attract like a certain type of person and like in places like Taipei, whereas you go to places like where I'm serving right now for my substitute service, Nantou, Zhusan specifically. It's a rural area in central Taiwan, very beautiful. I mean, people there, they can be a little bit superstitious, but that's also a product of having their common wisdom and their common sense informed by traditional culture, which is Chinese, by the way. And so their understanding of geopolitics is also very skewed that way. I'm not going to say that these people like are just like very like pro CPC. They're not. Are they like pro immediate reunification? Probably not. But they're also a lot more real about the things they observe. And so I went to buy chicken because it was like a new class of conscripts coming in, and we have a tradition whereas like when a new class comes in, the previous class like treats them to food because when they're out of boot camp. So it's weird. We're not military, but we still go through like a military style boot camp for 2 weeks that whips us into shape and discipline and all that. So this is like their first meal with real food after boot camp, because the food at boot camp makes airplane food look very good. Anyways, I was trying to get the chicken, and he was like, "Oh, you're doing your service," and I was like, "Yeah." So we talked about like military service and how like it was expanded from 4 months to 1 year for people born in 2005 and after, and he was talking about how man, it looks like we might be becoming the next Ukraine, and I was like, yeah. And then we talked about Ukraine for a bit, and I just straight up said, Zelensky is Biden's whore, and who's sending his people to their deaths and wrecking his own country. And the guy, the owner of the restaurant, was like, I feel like that's what Tsai Ing-wen's becoming.
Yeah. So that's yeah. No, go ahead, Angelo. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting what you just said just before. It makes me realize that actually there's in terms of the way the media and the system manipulates in the West, it's very much emotion driven. And what happens that this emotion doesn't work much with the Asian societies, because I think they're more pragmatic. The society here, if you talk to Chinese and you say, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to give you some freedom." I mean, average Chinese laugh at you, and the same in Taiwan. They are very pragmatic. It's like, can I put food on the table? Can I put my kids to education? Healthcare. Is my life better from one day to another? What is it worth for me to have that freedom, which is a fake freedom, by the way? It's just words. If I'm homeless, overnight I can become homeless. So I think there's only so much. And there's only so much they can influence people, and it work. If you look at the demographic, the DPP, they get the young kids. They get the young kids who grew up with Netflix, and that might work. But the older generation, they're like, older. They're actually the one that actually learn through history books and not Netflix. That doesn't work. Why would you be friends with Japanese when they massacred millions of Chinese? And they humiliated. How can you be pro-West when you learn about the 100 years of humiliation? It's
I
just
think a
crazy.
huge part of it was also just the
It's about
anti.
Jewish. It's about Jewish worshiping Germans. You see my point? You see the parallel?
Yeah.
It's about
Yeah.
Jews worshiping Germans. So Taiwanese, the way they're acting now, it's the same as that.
I think so I mean, traditional societies, your people's common sense, their traditions, they come from the grassroots. They come from generations of they're homegrown from community. And if you want to make changes, you convince the people. Whereas like you have these things like very top down. You have NGOs. It's kind of like it's kind of like the Karl Popper stuff, which one of the ideologues that George Soros was a huge fan of, which is in order to save liberalism of itself, you need these civil society institutions to dictate culture. See, because like traditional cultures and like actual people's common sense and their traditions and all that stuff, it can't be manipulated the way institutions can. And that's what we're seeing with Ukraine and young people's ideas of freedom and democracy and stuff. And mind you, I feel like color revolution tactics only work if people see like a good standard of living in America. Because people don't want color revolutions for the sake of color revolutions. They want color revolutions because there's this implied promise that, hey, if you go through with it, you'll live like the Americans you see in Hollywood. But like now in America, like you go to any city, there's a bunch of homelessness. There's a bunch of you can get like attacked or mugged randomly. There's like a bunch of crackheads. There's like it's a very sad state of very sad state. And if as more people see the truth in that, they're gonna know like where's the freedom in that, like the freedom to be a crackhead, like no thanks. And as soon as America keeps on declining that way, if it doesn't change course, then color revolution tactics are going to be less effective. And if America does change course, that would mean like the embrace of multipolarity and a move away from Western hegemony, and you would see the defunding of those NGOs that are doing those things. And I bring it to the whole Ukraine thing because my friend attended that Ukraine conference, and she's not like hardcore like pro Russia or anything. In fact, she's like pretty neutral about it. She's just like anti NATO and anti US imperialism as an American. And she attended, and there was this guy at that what's that organization called? It's like Ukraine Peace or Ukraine and Taiwan or something like that. He was giving a whole speech about like how Russia has a history of like genociding a bunch of people like back in like over a few thousand years. And I'm like, over a few thousand years, that means you're complicit too. Have you ever heard of the Kievan Rus? Kievan Rus? Where's Kiev? You're complicit in it too if you want to go that route. And it's and then anyways, my friend asked so what about NATO and America? And then like the guy just like got really mad at her, and then he was saying that we need to America needs to keep providing us with weapons and stuff. And I'm just thinking, well, why don't you go there and fight yourself then? You're here like selling war, hiding behind that like soft-spoken uwu voice. Fuck you. Sorry, wait, am I allowed to say that on this show?
I guess I don't know. I don't really have any set rules.
Okay,
I want
sorry.
to. I was showing you this article before the show, and this is Tsai Ing-wen saying war is not an option. But I just wonder if she knows that it's not really her choice. That this most likely is going to happen because the U.S. is going to do something to precipitate some sort of conflict in Taiwan. What scenario do a lot of people imagine some sort of conflict could possibly take place, and how do they imagine that it will turn out if they imagine a conflict will take place?
I think most people think war is something terrible, which it is, and they don't. It's some people think that the U.S. will step in and help. People who are more realistic about the situation don't. Some people see it as like a very protracted scenario, like Ukraine, where we'll keep on fighting, and that's why like some people are telling me, hey, once you're done with your service, like just get the hell out of Taiwan. There's but then there's also some people who think that it'll just be an operation where like the leadership is removed and a new one that's more favorable to Beijing is placed in. And I mean, if something like if war were to break out, I hope
with that.
I would hope it's something like that. I don't want like something like a protracted situation like Ukraine. I mean, you're the military guy, so you're probably better versed in this. But it's I think according to a study by the Rand Corporation, it's like Taiwan can defend itself for how many days before the PLA takes over. I mean, the PLA only has to launch airstrikes on a few strategic locations, like I guess runways and stuff like that. It could totally paralyze the what is it, the supply lines and the Air Force. And then I guess the amphibious landing might be a little bit hard, but I mean the PLA has a lot of people. And yeah, I mean on the internet there's a joke which is like in the morning we'll I think I mentioned it last time we were on Jing Jing show. In the morning we'll in the morning the PLA comes, in the afternoon we'll be lining up to get our new IDs. There's that line, so it varies. There's a lot of different voices about this situation, but yeah, people. There's also a lot of people saying, well, war's gonna have to come eventually. It's always been a matter of when, not if. And I think for a while that was true. I feel that until 1979 that was the case. But starting in 1979, I feel like the situation changed after Beijing was admitted into the UN as China's representative. I mean, Deng Xiaoping took China on a new course and had a new approach with dealing with the Taiwan issue, and wanted one of mutual like more communications, more exchanges, and pursuing a path of a more peaceful reunification. And now, but people like to focus on the second part where they say we will not give up the use of force. And
Yes.
because I mean, we will not give up the use of force. I mean, wasn't that like Abraham Lincoln, for example, when he reunified the Union? It's not like
Exactly.
war was. It's not like war was. I don't know if it was his first choice or not, but the he did not give up the use of force. That's what it was. And I want to remind people that the conflict between the mainland and Taiwan, it might not feel this way because of decades of separation. Actually over a century. Because I feel like 1945 to 1949, although it was nominally reunified, it was too chaotic of a time to really feel unified. Makes people's consciousness change a little bit, but yeah, it's at the end of the day, it is still a civil war, or it's the unfinished business of a civil war. It is a domestic is a domestic issue, and unless the administration here establishes a new Taiwanese republic and divorces itself from the so-called Republic of China, then it's still a domestic issue.
Yes, and of course, I think this unresolved civil war it's artificially perpetuated by U.S. involvement. I guess my last question is, and then Angela, you ask any last question that you might have. There's a growing U.S. military presence on Taiwan. They are creeping in dozens and then a couple of hundred so-called advisors, along with billions of dollars worth of weapons. Are people in Taiwan, are they aware of this and the consequences of this? How the U.S. describes this themselves as a tripwire that would automatically involve the U.S. in a conflict. And as you say, you referenced the Rand Corporation, there's the CSIS, these U.S. think tanks talk about Taiwan winning, maintaining their political autonomy, but having all infrastructure and industry scoured from the surface of the island. That is
what use is all of that stuff if you don't have your infrastructure in your industrial base?
Exactly. So are people aware of this growing U.S. military presence, and what do they think about it?
I am not entirely sure what people think about this. To be honest, it's not something I have followed too much, so I don't want to get too much into it, and but yeah, I'll have to talk to some of my friends, because when you're in substitute service, it's like you're in your own little bubble away from the rest of society. It's like because especially where I'm serving, it's off limits to civilians. Like a lot of substitute service, they do they work at like household registration offices, or if like they work at like fire departments, like in the city or in towns. I'm like at the training center, which yeah, you're just living on campus the whole time. So yeah, I'm not too aware of what people think of this issue particularly, but
at the moment, okay, fair enough.
I do think though, in the past, when I've brought up though how there is CIA presence over here, a lot of people just think like I'm speaking nonsense. I think
so. They don't they don't even kind of believe that it's happening, because it's so ridiculous and possibly so uncomfortable to even think about. Maybe
I think as more obviously dystopian the way the U.S. is like becoming, like it's not something that can be swept under the rug anymore. More and more people are open to these ideas. Got like at the office the other day, I spoke of some conspiracies that were proven to be true that happened in the U.S. and people were like, wow, that sounds like it could be a possibility. So people's attitudes are changing on this issue, which I think is a positive development. But it's also a time where educating people about these matters is of the essence, because it's people have their intuition, but that's not everything. You still need like more of a historical context and a bit of theory and all of that, because as no matter how, let's say people's like thought process is a system. Now, no matter how good a system is, the output is not going to be too good if your input's bad.
Yes, good point. That's a very good point. Angela, do you have any other questions for Shiang Yu?
I'd like maybe to talk about the red lines of China. I mean, just first of all, I think I've been thinking these days that probably the red lines of China are actually much more flexible, and I wouldn't see. You see, I don't know if you guys remember the joke of the CIA has unveiled the secret Chinese plots, which is for China to wait that the US collapse. Just sit down, relax, and wait for the US to collapse. I have the impression, that really there might be some red lines which are, probably having nuclear missiles to be based on in Taiwan. That would be really like they'd have to do something. But just think, even a declaration of independence of Taiwan. You see, that would be, China is looking at the US, and They know that the US is pushing for war and confrontation. Why would you give the satisfaction to the US to do what they're expecting you to do? What I'm saying is that the time is on the side of China. I think at some point, even a formal declaration, why, again, every single year that passes by is in favor of China. Even you can declare whatever you want. Ukraine is saying, well, we know that the red lines, you cannot go into NATO, and Ukraine says it, and so on. But, at the end of the day, there are facts on the ground. Facts on the ground, what are they? 50% of Taiwanese economy is de facto it's with China. There's so many elements, and China is expecting. We see clearly that the power, the G7 power, they are declining. Those pressure, there's only so much. Even if you put thousands of US troops in Taiwan, so what? Every single year, there are less countries recognizing Taiwan as the representative of China. There are only a few islands, it's just everything is declining. So I'm interested to see what would be the red lines you think for China that would trigger an invasion on the island.
I think, like you said, the stationing of U.S. nuclear weapons on Taiwan might do the trick. Another is a formal declaration of independence, although I'm not sure the extent of what kind of a military operation that would entail. Basically that, and yeah, there aren't that many red lines, other than just no formal declaration of independence. Everything else we can wait and discuss. The P in CPC stands for patience, and they see it's the CPC just doesn't like it when Taiwan, like, it's not maintaining the status quo. It's moving closer and closer to Washington. It's formalizing. Like, nowadays, it's like the relationship that the administration here has with the U.S. I don't know. It's funny to think, because like it makes the Jiang Jingguo era, like the son of Chiang Kai-shek era, like, if you're talking about like de facto, like, sovereignty and like independence and making your own decisions, there was a little bit more of that back then, even though he was anti-separatist, than there is now. It's
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think these are really just the red lines, and everything else is just we can work with. And I mean, that's been the case for so many decades. I honestly think the CPC was a little bit negligent of like building bridges with like the people on Taiwan for like during the Hu Jintao years, actually. And I think right now it's, I don't know, the U.S. is acting the way it is because it's keenly aware of everything you're saying. It's desperate. It's not the way you behave, even as a hegemonic power. That's not the way you conduct yourself or behave when you're trying to get things done. It's like I mean, if you think of the U.S. as like a mafia, like a mob boss, the good mob bosses in history that got things done, I'm not saying they're like good as people, I'm saying they were effective in getting their jobs done, making money and all of that. They only resorted to force if absolutely necessary. They got people to work with him by offering incentives. What's that phrase? It's something about easier to attract something with honeys, with honey. I don't know. You know what I mean.
Give another.
Yes.
Give him an offer that he cannot refuse.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, well, there's also that.
Yeah.
The U.S. is out of offers that can't be refused.
Yeah. Even with all of America's military force, fewer and fewer people are interested in playing along. And the only way that they really get their way anywhere is this toxic, cancerous infection of a society. They try to make it look like grassroots, but really they're just poisoning the grass and putting AstroTurf in its place. I think that is probably their last and most effective weapon. And I think people talking about Taiwan, people outside of Taiwan talking about Taiwanese independence, every decision right now is being made by the U.S. in Washington, not by the people of Taiwan. And that's very important to understand. If you really want independence for Taiwan, recognize that the biggest threat to Taiwan independence is actually the U.S.
Yes,
and I believe, yeah. So we've been going for over an hour. I maybe if anyone has any last things to say, otherwise, please check the video description for everywhere you can find and follow Xiang Yu's work. I even included a specific link to his most recent song. I thought it's great that finally there's a rap song about politics that isn't funded by the State Department praising U.S. hegemony. I think that's great. I think that's a good trend in the right direction.
Speaking of which, so after I think 2017, Chinese hip hop became more and more popular because of a show on primetime television on the mainland called Rap in China, and then like last year there was a show called it's like the MTV Taiwan did like a similar show. It was called MTV The Rappers. And so like hip hop is becoming more and more popular among like local hip hop, especially is becoming more and more popular among like young kids. And what's really funny is I think last year or 2 years ago I saw this this ad on Facebook. It's basically like they set up it's like this little seminar or lecture for kids to attend to learn about how to rap and stuff like that. And it was straight up funded by the CIA.
Unbelievable. Here in Thailand, they have a group called Rap Against Dictatorship. I mean, it's all in English, and these guys don't speak any English at all. So obviously, some geriatric in the State Department came up with that idea.
It's a Pussy Riots version, right? What they call it, the Pussy Riots, right?
Yeah,
that's the same version, you know.
Yeah, that is a band in
going straight to hell.
The only pro-establishment punk band in human history, Pussy Riot in Russia, that totally praising U.S. hegemony, unbelievable. So Xiang Yu, we're definitely going to have you back. This issue is extremely important. I see that it is equally important as Ukraine because the U.S. seeks to make Taiwan the next Ukraine. This is why we have to keep an eye on it. Just as you said, we have to continuously work to inform people inside Taiwan and around the world about this issue. And I think you've brought a lot of clarity to the issue. I really want to thank you for taking your time, sharing your knowledge with us here on Friday. Angelo, as always, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your Friday evening. It's all evening here where we are. Thank you, everyone who tuned in live. Again, please check the video description to see where you can find and follow all Xiang Yu's work. And until next time, bye for now.
Hold on, one last thing.
Oh, sure. Almost hit the button. Go ahead.
One's in the chat if you hate Tsai Ing-wen.
One in the chat. Type one in the chat if you don't like Tsai Ing-wen.
Just gotta wait a little bit.
I'll get it started.
Let's wait
put a one there. There we go. I don't see any.
How about if you
that's
like?
Good. That's a good way to end it.
Give it.
People
I
have
mean,
spoken.
if they like, do they get to put a 2? Just at least we check. You know, let's do something democratic. So we get the 2 versions.
2 in the chat if you think Tsai Ing-wen is a base girl boss. Sweet.
Yeah, I think the ones have it.
This is it's a Soviet era vote. It's 100%.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you again, Xiang Yu, and also Angelo, and everyone who tuned in. And until next time, bye. I'm going to hit the button for real this time.
Thanks for having us on. Thanks for having me on.
Yes.
It was very
nice.
Yes,
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. Yes, and Gonzalo Lira.
Yes.
I got to check this. He's still detained by Ukraine, and Mike Jones. I have to check the status. I saw some people saying in the comment section that it turned out he was okay, but I want to double check that.
Follow my YouTube channel linked below, and also my Twitter. I got some new music coming out very soon. I'm working on an album. It should be much better than anything I have out currently. So yeah, stay tuned.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, now for real, I'm hitting the button. Bye.